The year was 2243. Humanity had spread to the stars, carving out colonies on distant worlds, and yet there were still many corners of the galaxy where humanity had never set foot. Even after decades of exploration, some places remained elusive, hidden in the cosmic dust. Captain Aria Vega's crew of the Peregrine was tasked with one such mission: to explore a remote, uncharted system located on the far edges of known space. The system, designated 58 Theta, had been an anomaly for decades, its existence flagged by faint, untraceable signals. A strange pulse, like a whisper across the fabric of space itself. Aria leaned back in her chair, eyes scanning the holographic map as the soft hum of the ship's engines vibrated beneath her feet. The ship was small but efficient, perfect for long-range exploration. At the helm, Lieutenant Ethan Dax was navigating the vessel through the star-streaked void, a veteran of many deep space missions but still no less awed by the scale of what lay ahead. "Captain, we're approaching the outer rim of the system," Dax called, his voice steady but with a hint of excitement. "All systems are stable. Should I prepare for orbital insertion?" "Do it," Aria replied, her voice crisp, but her mind racing with curiosity. This system had been a mystery for so long. Humanity's efforts to probe it had been met with failure after failure. There were no records of any previous attempts to colonize, no histories of ships vanishing. It was as if the place had been erased from every map. Yet the signal persisted, faint, like an echo from the past. The Peregrine slowly descended into the system, the distant light of a dim, aging sun casting long shadows across the ship's hull. Aria squinted at the readouts in front of her. There was an odd reading, a signal. A human one. It's a distress beacon, Lieutenant Elena Cruz said from the communications console. Her face was bathed in the pale glow of the console's screens, the sharpness of her brow betraying her skepticism. "But it's not right. This is centuries old, Captain. The tech is ancient, archaic, even by early colony standards." "Can you trace its source?" Aria asked, her pulse quickening as she leaned forward. Cruz nodded. "It's coming from a planet in the system, near the third moon. But there's more. The signal's cadence matches one I've seen in pre-space history, before humanity's first jump to the stars." Aria's mind spun. A colony lost to time, sending out a signal after all these years? But why, and how? The possibility of encountering an ancient human settlement, one long forgotten, one that had somehow survived against the odds, sent a ripple of excitement through the crew. It could be the discovery of a lifetime. "Set course for the moon," Aria ordered, her voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. As the Peregrine changed its trajectory and approached the moon, the crew could see it, an unassuming rock, scarred by centuries of cosmic collisions. No signs of life, no cities, no structures, nothing at all. Yet the signal was persistent, unwavering. "Captain," Cruz said, her voice trembling now, "I'm seeing something in the atmosphere. There's something there. It's faint, but definitely artificial. The structures, if they are structures, are made of a material I can't identify." The crew fell silent. "Prepare for landing," Aria ordered. "Let's see what we're dealing with." Minutes passed in tense anticipation. The Peregrine descended, its hull shuddering gently as it cut through the thin atmosphere of the moon. The landing was smooth, almost eerily so, as if the planet itself was beckoning them down. The moment the ship's ramp descended, the crew stepped out onto the surface. The air was thin, and the ground beneath their boots was dry and cracked. And yet, they could see something in the distance. A series of dark shapes, stretching out toward the horizon, half buried in the lunar dust. "Towers, almost. Look at this," Dax muttered under his breath as he activated his scanner. This can't be. The materials, the energy readings, they're off the charts." Aria turned to him. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Dax said, his voice trailing off in disbelief, "these structures are from a civilization far older than anything we've encountered. It doesn't make sense. The team stood in silence for a moment, taking in the impossible sight. There was something otherworldly about the place, an unsettling stillness, like they had stepped into a time long past. And yet, the signal persisted. As the team began to investigate, scanning the ancient ruins, they noticed something strange. The ruins weren't just crumbled stone or rusted metal. They were alive, almost organic, pulsing with an energy that hummed under their skin. Cruz took a deep breath, her voice tight. "Captain, this isn't just a colony. It's something else, something far more alien." Aria stared at the structures in the distance, her mind spinning. This was no simple archaeological find. They weren't just going to uncover the history of a lost colony. They were about to stumble into a mystery that would challenge everything they knew about humanity's place in the universe. And, unknown to them, the first whispers of their fate had already begun. The team ventured deeper into the ruins. The once grand structures now eroded and encrusted with dust, yet their faint pulses of energy were impossible to ignore. Each step they took seemed to resonate with a strange hum, as if the ancient stones themselves were alive, breathing, or perhaps remembering something long forgotten. Aria felt a shiver crawl up her spine as she gazed up at the towering remnants of the city. It was impossible to ignore the unsettling feeling that hung in the air. The very atmosphere seemed to bend around them, distorting their perceptions. The surface of the moon was a barren wasteland, but these structures, they had an unnatural energy to them, something that tugged at the edges of her mind. "I don't like this," Lieutenant Cruz murmured, her voice low as her scanner beeped erratically. "These readings, they not just foreign. They alive." Dax, ever the optimist, stepped forward, his boots crunching on the desolate ground. He was drawn toward one of the larger structures, a towering spire of dark material that shimmered faintly in the dim light. The closer he got, the more the hum seemed to increase in intensity, and his breath quickened as his equipment flickered. It was as if the very presence of this place was warping reality itself. "Captain, you need to see this," Dax called, his voice tight with an excitement laced with something else, something darker. Aria and Cruz followed, their boots leaving imprints in the dust as they approached the spire. Dax was kneeling before it, his hands hovering above the ground, a mixture of awe and fear written across his face. "I've never seen anything like this before," Dax said, his voice hushed. "It's not stone, not metal, it's like the material is alive, shifting underneath the surface." Cruz frowned, moving closer to inspect the spire. She activated her scanner, but it gave no clear readings, only chaotic fluctuations. She touched the surface carefully, her fingers brushing against the cool, undulating texture. The moment her skin made contact, the structure seemed to react. The hum increased, vibrating through the air, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble. "Something's happening," Cruz said, stepping back, wide-eyed. "The structure, it's reacting to us." Aria took a deep breath and moved toward the base of the spire. She placed her hand against the cool surface. The hum was now resonating within her chest, deep and primal, a sensation that felt like a heartbeat, but not hers. As if the structure was trying to communicate. The longer she stood there, the more her surroundings seemed to blur, and the faintest flickers of vision danced at the edges of her perception. It was as though she was seeing things. Flashes of distant memories, places she had never been, people she had never met. "Captain," Cruz's voice broke through the disorienting vision. "Captain, we have to go. Something's wrong." But Aria couldn't move, her fingers tingled, the spire's pulse lulling her deeper into its strange hold. Her thoughts became disjointed, her focus splintering. She heard whispers, soft and unintelligible at first, but then clearer. "Help us, you are not alone." The words reverberated in her mind, like an ancient echo, the sound both alien and familiar. She closed her eyes, trying to push it out, but the whispers only grew louder. "We remember you, we know you." It was a voice from the past, a voice that belonged to someone who had vanished long ago. But who, and why were they calling to her now? "Aria," Cruz shouted again, her voice urgent. The captain snapped back to reality, breaking free from the strange trance. She staggered backward, her mind racing. She had felt it, the connection. The presence that lingered in the air, almost as if it were alive, conscious. What the hell was that? Dax asked, his voice shaky. I don't know, Aria admitted, her heart racing. But I think we've just made contact with something, or someone, that's been lost for centuries. And I don't think it's human. Before anyone could respond, a sudden pulse of light erupted from the spire, blinding them all. The ground beneath their feet trembled violently, and the atmosphere seemed to warp, twisting in impossible ways. The team staggered back, disoriented as the air shimmered with a bizarre energy. The vision of the distant past, a fleeting glimpse of something almost familiar, flashed in Aria's mind once again. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the light faded, leaving the team in stunned silence. The hum of the spire slowed, returning to its faint, underlying rhythm, as if nothing had happened. Captain, Cruz said, her voice tight, I think we've awoken something. Something that shouldn't be disturbed. Aria's gaze remained fixed on the spire, her mind racing. What had just happened? Was it some sort of defense mechanism? Or had they unlocked something ancient and dangerous? She had no answers, but one thing was clear. They were no longer alone on this moon. Whatever had happened here centuries ago, whatever had caused this colony to disappear, was not finished. And now, it seemed, the past was reaching out to them, calling them to discover its secrets. As the crew began to regroup, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There were too many unanswered questions, too many hidden dangers. But one truth lingered in the air. They had uncovered a part of the galaxy's history that had been forgotten for a reason. And the consequences of that discovery were just beginning to unfold. The Peregrine crew huddled together in the shadow of the strange spire, their minds whirling with the implications of what they had just experienced. The planet was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of the structure, still reverberating through the air. No one spoke at first. Aria could feel the weight of the silence pressing in on her, her thoughts a tangled mess of confusion and unease. Captain, Cruz said, her voice low and hesitant, I think it's clear that something's different here. The readings are off the charts. The spire, the way it reacted to us, whatever happened, it's not natural. It's like it's alive in a way that we can't even begin to understand. Aria nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the pulsing structure. The image of the fleeting visions she had seen, the whispers, the flashes of people and places she didn't recognize, lingered in her mind. I felt it, too, she confessed. It's like the spire was trying to communicate with us. But why, and who, or what, was calling out to us? Dax, standing a few feet away, tapped his wrist console. They've been scanning the surrounding area. There's more to this place than just this spire. The entire region around us is filled with strange energy signatures. The structures don't seem to be just ruins. They're connected to something deeper. Something buried. Aria's heart skipped a beat. Buried? What are you suggesting? I don't know, Dax said, running a hand through his short cropped hair. But the energy I'm picking up suggests that whatever lies beneath these ruins is somehow tied to the spire. It's like an ancient power source, but one that is reacting to us. It feels like it's waking up. Can we shut it down? Cruz asked quickly, her tone laced with concern. Whatever is happening here, I think we need to leave before it gets worse. I don't know, Aria said slowly, stepping closer to the spire once again, feeling that strange, magnetic pull. I think we've just scratched the surface. We can't leave without understanding what this is. We need to know what happened here. What caused this colony to disappear? We can't let it slip away again. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. They had come all this way, driven by the need to explore the unknown. But now the unknown felt far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Still, Aria's voice was firm, unyielding. We've come this far, and we're not turning back. We'll take precautions, but we need to understand what's happening. This may be humanity's only chance to uncover the truth of what happened to the lost colonists." Reluctantly, the crew agreed, though each of them knew that they were about to tread into territory no one had ever ventured before. They had come for answers, but now those answers might be more perilous than they could have imagined. As they continued to scan the surrounding ruins, they came across signs of an ancient civilization: shattered statues, faded murals, and symbols etched into the stone. It was clear that the colony had once been vibrant, thriving even, but something had gone horribly wrong. The murals depicted human figures alongside strange, alien creatures, tall, insectoid beings with elongated limbs and multifaceted eyes. They appeared to be interacting, trading, even living together. Aria's stomach twisted. Was this the story of a human race that had integrated with an alien species? Or had something far darker occurred here? The deeper they went, the more it became apparent that the integration wasn't one of peaceful coexistence. The alien figures in the murals were not portrayed as friendly. Rather, their postures and expressions were cold, indifferent. And the human figures, while their faces seemed hopeful in the early murals, became increasingly distorted as the artwork progressed. Their eyes were hollow, their bodies warped, as though they were losing themselves to something. "Do you see this?" Cruz whispered, her voice barely audible. "These humans, they're changing. They're becoming something else." The crew paused, each of them standing before the deteriorating images. What had happened to these colonists? Had they willingly merged with the alien race depicted in the murals? Or had they been forced? Whatever the case, the transformation was unmistakable and terrifying. Suddenly, Dax's voice broke the silence, sharp with urgency. "Captain, the spire, it's accelerating its energy output." Aria's heart raced. She turned toward the spire, feeling a deep sense of foreboding. The pulse of energy that had once been faint was now swelling, becoming more pronounced, sending shockwaves through the air. "Get back to the ship," Aria ordered, her voice steady despite the fear beginning to creep into her chest. Now, the crew turned in unison, moving quickly, but as they made their way back to the landing site, something strange happened. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble once again, but this time, it wasn't just the spire's pulse. It was a rhythmic vibration, as if the planet itself were stirring, waking from an eon-long slumber. The distant sky seemed to darken, clouds swirling unnaturally above them. The energy readings on their scanners spiked in erratic pulses, and Aria's mind raced. Something was happening. A shift in the very fabric of this place. The colony, the ruins, the spire, they weren't just remnants of a forgotten past. They were alive, and they were awakening. "Captain," Cruz cried out, pointing toward the horizon. From the edge of the ruins, shapes began to emerge. Figures, silhouetted against the swirling darkness above. They were humanoid, but unlike anything the crew had seen. Tall, thin, their limbs elongated, their faces covered in strange patterns, their eyes glowing faintly. Aria's breath caught in her throat. They were the lost colonists. But they were not human anymore. They had become something else, something alien. Their transformation was complete, and now, they were coming for the crew. "Move," Aria shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Back to the ship, now." The crew broke into a sprint, their hearts pounding in their chests. But as they ran, the ground began to ripple beneath them, and strange, eerie sounds filled the air. The figures of the colonists, transformed beyond recognition, moved swiftly toward them, their forms shimmering and flickering in the dim light. The crew didn't look back. They couldn't. They had unleashed something ancient and unknowable, and now they had to face the consequences. But what would happen if they couldn't escape? What had the colonists become? And what did the alien race they had integrated with want from them? Aria's mind raced as she sprinted toward the Peregrine. The answers were within their grasp, but would they survive long enough to uncover them? The crew of the Peregrine raced back toward the ship, their hearts hammering in their chests as the eerie figures of the lost colonists closed in from all sides. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with every step they took, and the strange, distorted shapes of the transformed humans flickered in the dim, swirling light above. There was no telling how many there were, but it felt like the entire moon was alive, watching, waiting. Aria's mind was a blur of thoughts, disjointed, panicked. How had this happened? What had they unleashed by activating the spire? They had only wanted answers. Now it seemed that the answers they had found were far darker than they could have ever imagined. "Keep moving," she shouted, pushing herself harder. The peregrine was only a few hundred meters away now, but the air seemed thick with tension, the strange figures closing in with unsettling speed. Cruz was at the rear, scanning their surroundings with a frantic look in her eyes. "Captain," she called, her voice tight with fear. "The energy readings are spiking off the charts. The spire. It's pulling everything in. Whatever's coming after us. It's not just these colonists. It's something else." "What do you mean, something else?" Aria gasped, trying to catch her breath. "Their energy," Cruz said, pointing to the figures in the distance, now more distinct as they approached, their forms shimmering with an unnatural glow. They're not just human anymore. They've fused with whatever alien intelligence is buried here. They're being controlled by it. And it's spreading." Before Aria could respond, a pulse of energy shot from the spire, the shockwave knocking them all to the ground. The sound was deafening, a deep, low growl that resonated through the air, rattling their bones. The figures of the colonists halted in their tracks, their eyes glowing brighter now, their forms flickering with bursts of static. The pulse from the spire had brought them to a standstill, almost as though they were waiting for something. "Get to the ship," Aria shouted again, already on her feet, her heart racing. They had to reach the peregrine before it was too late, before whatever force had overtaken these colonists overwhelmed them all. But as they sprinted toward the landing site, a sudden realization struck Aria. They weren't going to make it. The colonists, or whatever they had become, weren't just following them. They were hurting them. The shimmering figures began to spread out in a widening arc, cutting off the crew's escape route. The ground between them and the peregrine seemed to warp, as if the space itself was bending to the will of the beings. Time itself felt stretched, distorting their perception of distance and speed. No matter how fast they ran, the figures never seemed to get farther away. It was as if the very laws of physics were working against them. "Captain, look," Dax shouted, his voice rising with panic. Aria turned just in time to see a massive shape emerge from the shadows, a hulking figure towering above them. It wasn't like the others. This one was different, larger, more imposing. It was humanoid but with features far more alien, its body covered in what looked like shifting armor, its face a smooth, blank slate. Its eyes, however, burned with an intense, unnatural light. It was like the leader, the one pulling the strings behind the others. "We don't have much time," Cruz cried, her voice breaking. "If we don't get to the ship now." The figure raised a hand, and the ground beneath their feet trembled once more, sending a shockwave of energy rushing outward. The crew stumbled, their limbs heavy, as if the very atmosphere had thickened. Aria could feel it now, the presence of something far more ancient than the transformed colonists, something powerful, something in control. The figure's voice echoed in their minds, clear and resounding despite the lack of any sound. It was a cold, alien presence, one that carried the weight of millennia. "You have awakened us." The words were not spoken aloud. They were felt. In their minds, in their bones, in their very souls. "You have disturbed what was meant to remain undisturbed. The price of your discovery will be your own." Aria's heart sank. This wasn't just about the lost colonists. This was far worse. The alien intelligence, the force that had merged with the humans here, had been waiting. Waiting for them to come. Waiting for them to make the mistake of uncovering the truth. "Captain," Dax shouted, grabbing her arm. "We need to leave now, or we're dead." But Aria didn't move. She stood frozen, her mind racing. This alien force. It wasn't just using the colonists, it was controlling them. The spire, the energy, the way the colonists had fused with the alien species. It was all part of some vast, ancient design. A design that no one could comprehend. Then, just as the crew began to prepare for a final, desperate sprint to the Peregrine, the ground before them cracked open, revealing an immense chamber beneath the surface. It was unlike anything they had seen before, a vast network of tunnels, glowing with alien energy. The structure was alive, twisting and shifting beneath the moon's surface. The alien figure raised its hand again, and the cracks in the ground expanded, revealing more of the network beneath. The chamber seemed to hum, its pulse syncing with the one from the spire above. You have come too far. The colony was not abandoned. It was transformed. It is now part of us. Aria took a step back, her mind reeling. The transformation of the lost colonists wasn't a gradual process. It was a planned one. The entire colony had been integrated into this alien intelligence. The ones they saw now, the twisted, altered humans, were just the first stage. The rest of the colony, the ones who had once lived here, were buried deep within this network, locked in a cycle of perpetual fusion with the alien race. We can't let this continue, Aria said through gritted teeth, her voice filled with resolve. We have to shut it down. We have to stop it before it spreads. But the alien figure's voice, its presence, was already upon them, overwhelming, all-encompassing. You cannot stop what has already begun. You cannot unmake what is already part of us. You will join us, as they did. As you will. Suddenly, the colonists surged forward, their eyes burning with the same cold light as the alien figure. They were no longer human, not fully. Their transformation was complete, and now, they were here to ensure that the crew's fate would mirror that of the lost colony. The crew didn't have much time. Their only chance to escape was to find a way to sever the connection before it was too late. But how could they fight against an intelligence that had waited centuries for them to stumble upon this place? The answers lay beneath the surface, in the dark chambers of the alien network. But could they survive long enough to reach them? Or would they, too, become part of the unyielding, eternal fusion of human and alien? The alien intelligence towered over them, its presence overwhelming every thought, every sense. The transformed colonists surged forward, their movements synchronized, like a single entity, their bodies now extensions of the alien force that controlled them. Aria felt a chill crawl down her spine, the weight of their gaze pressing down on her. They were no longer individuals. They were a collective. They were something else. The ground beneath their feet began to shake again, and the dark, glowing network of tunnels below the surface seemed to pulse with life, as if the entire moon itself were alive. The spire's hum had grown louder, more insistent. The alien intelligence was reaching out. Everywhere, all at once, like a web of thought connecting everything in this place. We have to move, Cruz said, her voice strained with fear, as the colonists came closer. Captain, we can't fight them. This isn't a battle we can win. We need to shut down whatever's causing this, or we'll never leave here. Aria swallowed hard, trying to focus, trying to ignore the pull in her mind, the whispering thoughts of the alien force creeping into her consciousness. It was everywhere, inside her thoughts, inside her very being. The force was calling to her, like a siren song, promising knowledge and power, promising a connection that transcended everything she had ever known. But at what cost? She glanced at the Peregrine, still distant, but their only hope for escape. Their only hope to stop this. They had to reach the ship. They had to find a way to sever the connection before it consumed them all. But the colonists were moving closer, and with every step, the ground beneath their feet grew more unstable. It was as if the entire landscape was beginning to dissolve, the solid surface cracking and shifting like sand. The alien intelligence had already begun to alter the fabric of this place. And if it reached the ship, if it reached their only escape, there would be no way out. We're not going to make it, Dax said, his voice hoarse with panic. There's no time. Aria's mind raced. They couldn't outrun the transformed colonists, and they couldn't outfight them. The alien intelligence was far too powerful, far too ancient. They had no weapons that could even begin to challenge it. But there had to be another way. There had to be a way to disrupt the connection, to sever the bond between the colonists and the alien force before it was too late. Then, something inside her shifted. A memory, a flash, of the visions she had seen earlier, the images of the lost colonists, the way they had been slowly transformed. They hadn't just fused with the alien race, they had been changed by it. Their biology, their minds, their very perceptions of reality had been altered, bent to the will of the alien intelligence. But what if? What if the key to stopping this was reversing that change? What if there was a way to separate the colonists from the alien intelligence, to break the bond that had merged them? Wait, Aria shouted, her voice cutting through the panic. I think I know how we can stop this. The crew paused, turning toward her, confusion and desperation in their eyes. Look at the spire, Aria said, pointing toward the massive structure. The energy pulses from it were stronger now, more erratic. It's not just a power source. It's a conduit that connects this alien intelligence to the colonists, maybe to everything on this moon. If we can somehow disrupt the flow of energy between the spire and the colonists, we might be able to break the connection. But how do we disrupt it? Cruz asked, her face pale. We can't even approach it without being attacked by those things. I don't know, Aria admitted, her voice steady despite the fear creeping in. But the Peregrine has an energy-dampening field. We can use it. If we position it right, we can create a feedback loop that should sever the connection, at least temporarily. But how will we get to the ship without being caught? Dax asked, his eyes wide with panic. If they're already everywhere. Aria's eyes narrowed, a sudden realization hitting her like a jolt. The colony, they weren't all here. The transformed colonists had flooded the surface, yes, but what if the real control center, the source of the alien intelligence's power, was beneath the surface, in the ancient network that was now awakening? We don't have to fight them on the surface, Aria said slowly, a plan beginning to form in her mind. We go below. We access the control center of the alien network. If we can reach the core of it, we might be able to interrupt the flow of energy to the spire and the colonists. And then, we take it from there, Cruz finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. Aria nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. This was a long shot, a dangerous gamble, but it was their only chance. If they could reach the core beneath the surface, they might be able to stop the alien intelligence from taking full control. They might be able to break the connection, not just for the lost colonists, but for the entire colony, before the alien race could spread any further. We move now, Aria said, her voice resolute. We get to the ship, we get to the core, and we stop this. With one final, shared glance of determination, the crew sprinted toward the opening in the ground, the alien figures in pursuit but held back, their movements now hesitant. They were aware of something they hadn't expected. The crew was no longer just prey. They were a threat, and the alien intelligence was beginning to sense it. As Aria and the others descended into the network of tunnels, the ground closing behind them, the moon itself seemed to groan. The ancient system was awakening, but they were not going to let it take control again, not without a fight. They had no idea what lay ahead, what the alien intelligence truly was, or how far its power stretched. But one thing was certain. They were about to descend into the heart of the nightmare, and there was no turning back. The core awaited them, and it was alive. The tunnels beneath the surface were dark and winding, the walls pulsing faintly with a strange, alien glow. The crew moved quickly, their breaths shallow and rapid, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Every now and then, the air would hum, resonating with the energy that seemed to flow through the very rock beneath their feet. The deeper they went, the more intense the vibrations became, like the heartbeat of the moon itself. Aria led the way, her mind focused, blocking out the lingering fear that threatened to creep into her thoughts. The alien intelligence, the strange transformed colonists, the spire above, it was all connected. And she was determined to sever that connection, even if it meant descending into the heart of whatever had taken root in this place. The walls of the tunnels became more intricate as they progressed, etched with symbols that seemed to pulse and shift, as if the stone itself was alive. Some of the crew members stopped to examine the markings, but Aria urged them on. There was no time to waste. The alien intelligence was growing stronger, and every moment they delayed brought them closer to being overwhelmed by it. "We're getting closer," Dax said, his voice tense, his hand hovering over his scanner. "The energy levels are spiking. It's like it knows we're coming." "Of course it knows," Cruz muttered, her voice tight with anxiety. "It's been waiting for us. It's been watching us, and now it's trying to control us." "It won't," Aria said firmly, though doubt gnawed at her. She couldn't afford to let fear take hold, not now. "We're stopping it here." Suddenly, the tunnel before them widened into a massive cavern, the walls stretching high above them, and the floor covered in an intricate web of glowing lines. The network that had once been dormant was alive now, alive and active, its power pulsing through every crack in the rock. In the center of the cavern, the source of the energy revealed itself, a massive structure, towering like a monument. It was made of a strange, blackened material that seemed to shift and shimmer, as though it were both solid and liquid at once. The moment they stepped into the cavern, the air seemed to thicken, the atmosphere charged with a palpable energy. The structure before them seemed to draw them in, as if it was alive and aware of their presence. Its surface rippled, reflecting the faint light from their suits, but there was something else, something deeply unsettling. Aria could feel it, the presence. This was the core, the heart of the alien intelligence. As they approached the structure, the energy around them intensified, the walls of the cavern vibrating with a deep, resonant hum. It was like the entire network, the entire moon, was drawing breath in unison. Aria's pulse quickened, the urgency of the moment sinking in. "We need to get to the center," Dax said, his voice almost a whisper. "The source of the energy, if we can disrupt it, we can break the connection." Aria nodded, stepping forward. But as she did, something shifted. The glowing lines on the cavern floor began to pulse more rapidly, and a low, guttural sound echoed through the air. The alien intelligence was aware of them, aware that they were trying to destroy what it had created. The energy around them crackled, and Aria could see shapes emerging from the edges of the cavern, flickering in and out of existence like distorted shadows. The colonists, the transformed humans. But now, they were no longer just moving toward them. They were merging with the structure, melding with it. Their bodies shifted and reformed, melding into the blackened material of the core. They were becoming part of it, becoming part of the very energy that powered the alien force. "Move," Aria shouted, but the words barely left her mouth before the figures of the colonists surged forward, their glowing eyes fixed on the crew. Aria's heart raced as the crew ran for cover, but the cavern was vast, and there was nowhere to hide. The colonists were everywhere, blocking every exit, cutting off their retreat. "This is it," Cruz said, panic rising in her voice. "We're trapped. We can't fight them. Not like this." "We don't need to fight them," Aria said, her voice steady despite the terror tightening around her chest. She glanced at Dax and Cruz. "We need to reach the core. That's where we can shut it all down." The colonists, if they could still be called that, advanced, their movements fluid and unnatural. Their bodies were no longer human in the conventional sense, their forms stretched and distorted, their skin shimmering with alien energy. The power of the intelligence flowed through them like a living current. "We don't have a choice," Aria said, taking a deep breath. "We're going to have to disconnect them. If we destroy the core's connection to the spire, to the network, maybe we can sever the link." "But how?" Cruz asked, looking at the structure. "This thing, it's not just a machine. It's alive." "I don't know," Aria admitted, "but if we don't try, we're dead. We have to act now." With no more words, the crew ran toward the core. The colonists, no longer fully human, began to move in unison, their eyes glowing, their hands raised. As they did, the ground beneath the crew's feet began to tremble violently, the very air crackling with energy. And then, a voice, a chilling, alien voice, spoke in their minds, louder than any sound. "You cannot stop this. You are already part of us." The presence pressed in on them, tightening around their thoughts, pushing them toward the edge of madness. Aria felt her mind reel, her thoughts slipping out of her control. But then, a spark of clarity broke through the noise. The presence wanted them to give in. It wanted to consume them. But they couldn't let it. "Keep going," Aria shouted, her voice barely audible over the overwhelming hum of the structure. The crew pushed forward, their bodies aching from the oppressive energy, the colonists closing in behind them. The core seemed to stretch before them, its blackened surface rippling like water, but they had no choice now. They had to reach the heart of the structure. They had to find a way to disrupt the flow of power. And then, Aria saw it, an opening, a crack in the surface of the core. It was faint, barely visible, but it was enough. She rushed toward it, the rest of the crew following close behind. "I don't know if this will work," she said, her voice tense. "But it's our only shot." With trembling hands, she placed her palm against the crack, feeling the energy coursing through the surface. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a sudden surge, a burst of light, and the entire cavern shook as the core began to pulse violently. The alien voice returned, louder this time, filled with fury. "You will fail. You are nothing." But Aria wasn't listening anymore. She pressed harder, her determination a fire in her chest. The crew held their breath as the structure's energy began to fluctuate, the walls of the cavern vibrating as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. They had triggered something dangerous. The question now was whether they could survive it, or if the core would take them with it. The core pulsed violently beneath Aria's palm, the raw energy coursing through her, crackling with a power she couldn't comprehend. The air around them shimmered with distortion, the world bending and warping as if reality itself was unraveling. The alien intelligence's voice echoed through their minds, becoming a cacophony of anguish and rage. "You cannot break what has already been woven. You cannot erase what has become one." But Aria didn't stop. She gritted her teeth, feeling the weight of the alien presence pressing down on her consciousness, pushing against her will. The colonists, transformed, merged with the alien force, moved closer, their forms flickering in and out of existence. They were mere extensions of the intelligence, tools that would prevent them from succeeding. "We have to overload the core," Aria gasped, her voice strained, fighting through the mental onslaught. "We need to destabilize it. Now." Dax and Cruz, close behind, worked to stabilize the makeshift detonators they'd rigged from the Peregrine systems. Their hands trembled, their eyes wide with fear, but their determination was just as strong. There was no other option. If they didn't disrupt the core, if they didn't sever the connection to the alien intelligence, the transformation of the lost colonists would continue, and the intelligence would spread further, into their ship, into the galaxy. "Ready," Cruz said, her voice tight with focus. She planted the device, adjusting its settings, fingers shaking. "On my mark," Aria said, fighting to keep her focus on the task. The presence of the alien intelligence was overwhelming, but she refused to give in to it. She had to concentrate. They were so close. Then, the ground beneath their feet shuddered. The colonists, now mere husks of their former selves, began to scream, not with their voices, but with the voice of the alien intelligence itself. It wasn't human. It wasn't even sensible. The sound was a fractal, a pulse of raw emotion and thought that seared into their minds, trying to rip them apart. Aria could feel her mind fraying at the edges. They were fighting not just to stop the intelligence, but to maintain their very sense of self. "We have to go now," Dax shouted, his voice a mix of panic and urgency. Aria felt a cold, searing energy spread through her body as the core surged once more. The alien intelligence was adapting, trying to reroute its power, trying to prevent them from succeeding. She could feel the pull, the gravity of the collective will of the colonists, now one with the alien force, fighting back. She stumbled back, fighting the sensation, but it wasn't enough. She wasn't strong enough to break the connection on her own. Then, Cruz's voice broke through the static in her mind. "Captain, the device." Aria looked up. Cruz had activated the final phase of the destabilizer, a brilliant surge of energy that was arcing out toward the core. But the colonists were closing in, too quickly. Their glowing eyes, empty and filled with the alien presence, were mere feet away. Aria could feel the pulse of their thoughts, invasive, overwhelming. She grabbed the nearest weapon, a small hand laser from the Cruz pack, and fired into the air, hoping to distract them. But the shot barely fazed the colonists. They were relentless, their forms seemingly immune to any conventional weapon. The destabilizer device flared. There was a loud crack, like thunder splitting the sky. Then, the energy released. It was an explosion of raw power, the air around them vibrating with an intensity that seemed to tear the very fabric of space. The core shuddered violently as though it was being ripped apart from the inside. The lights in the cavern blinked, dimming, then flaring again in rapid bursts. The alien voice screamed, and for a brief moment, Aria could feel the intelligence's presence being pulled apart, the threads of its vast, ancient consciousness unraveling, breaking. The colonists stopped moving, their bodies twitching, their glowing eyes flickering in disorientation. It was working. "Go, now!" Aria shouted, turning toward the exit. The unstable energy from the core had sent shockwaves through the cavern, making the ground tremble and crack beneath them. The tunnels were starting to collapse, and the space around them was shifting, warping. It was as though the very reality they were in was unstable. The crew sprinted for the nearest exit, the rumbling of the moon's surface growing louder, the sounds of the alien intelligence's last cry echoing in their minds. The colonists, now disoriented, still connected but no longer fully under control, were left behind, their bodies flickering as the alien force struggled to stabilize itself. But Aria knew it wasn't over. "Not yet. We're not out of the woods," Dax said, breathing heavily as they ran. "This place is going to collapse, Captain. We need to move, now." "I know," Aria replied, her voice tight with determination. They were almost there. The entrance to the surface was just ahead, but the alien intelligence was still in them, in the air, in the walls. Its presence would linger, an echo of something ancient and vast. It wouldn't just vanish, no matter what they did. They burst into the light, the surface of the moon blinding after the dark of the tunnels. The Peregrine sat a few hundred meters away, a beacon of hope. But as they ran toward it, Aria felt a strange pull inside her chest, a sensation that grew stronger the closer they got to the ship. No, it wasn't over. Not yet. The moment they reached the Peregrine and the ramp sealed behind them, Aria collapsed against the wall of the airlock, panting, her eyes scanning the crew. They were safe, for now. But she knew the truth. The alien intelligence wasn't gone. They had only delayed it, severed part of the connection, but it wasn't something that could be easily erased. It had become part of the fabric of the lost colony, and now, it had a new target. Them. Their ship, their minds, and somewhere, deep beneath the surface of the moon, the spire still pulsed, still beckoned. The crew was not the end of the story. They were only the beginning.